Hunting is a sport enjoyed by many people. No doubt it's a fun hobby for these individuals, but today's case concerns a man who went on a hunting trip and never returned. Let's talk about Rick Bendele, who hasn't been seen or heard from in almost 25 years. Richard Willis Bendele was born on August 18, 1967, in Burley, Idaho. A few years later, he was joined by a younger sister named Tamara. Growing up, Rick was very much an outdoorsman, enjoying things like fishing, camping, and hunting. But his life wasn't always easy. Rick's father died when he was still pretty young, and he took over the caretaker role for his mom and sister. He also struggled with drug and alcohol abuse at some point. Rick would later get married and have 2 children, but that marriage fell apart. But by 1996, Rick seemed to be in a pretty good place. He was clean and sober and had a job at a potato plant in Hayburn, just down the road from Burley. He was in the process of finalizing his divorce, and he had a new girlfriend named Cindy Cowitz. Rick's children lived with his mom, and Rick lived with Cindy and her children in Burley. On the morning of Sunday, November 17, 1996, 29-year-old Rick went to his mom's house to borrow his dad's shotgun. He was planning to hunt pheasants close to Laidlaw Park, which is at Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, about 100 miles north of Burley. This would be the last time Rick was officially seen alive. Around 6 that evening, Rick called his mom from a cell phone in his truck, saying the truck wouldn't start. His mom would later say that he sounded worried, like he thought someone had done something to the truck. He asked his mom if she could come get him and said he would mark the road to help her find him. Rick's mom, Sandra Bendele, along with his girlfriend, Cindy Cowitz, set out to look for him in Cindy's truck. But on the way, they hit something on the road and had to turn back. Around 2 a.m. on November 18th, when they still hadn't found or heard from Rick, they called the Minidoka County Sheriff's Office and reported him missing. Investigators found Rick's truck the next morning near Laidlaw Corral, which is in or near Craters of the Moon. Right away, there were several signs that something was off. A window was broken, the car battery had been taken out and turned upside down, and despite his coat, cell phone, and dad's shotgun still being in the truck, there was no sign of Rick. There were also beer cans and an empty beer case in the road, presumably used in an attempt by Rick to mark the road like he said he would do. Because his truck had been found in Blaine County, the case was transferred to their sheriff's department. Search teams, dogs, and a helicopter were brought in, but all they ended up finding were 2 gloves from 2 separate pairs, as well as one of Rick's brand new sneakers. One of the gloves was from a set similar to the gloves Rick would have used at his work. The search ended 5 days after it had started. Rick's last paycheck was deposited into his account after he went missing, but the money there has never been touched. 7 years after he was last seen, he was declared legally dead by his estranged wife. The original case files were lost at some point and later restored to the best of investigators' abilities. There haven't been any significant updates in the case since around 2014, but it is still open and considered active. So what happened to Rick Bendele? There's been a lot of speculation, but there are 2 major theories I want to go over. The first theory is that Rick got lost and succumbed to the elements. He may have been killed by a predatory animal and his remains were scattered to the point that not much could be found. Or he could have taken shelter under a lava fissure, which is a long fracture or crack in a rock filled with lava. Lava also often erupts from lava fissures, making them that much more dangerous. The area where Rick was full of lava fissures, and he could have taken shelter in one but still died from exposure. If this did happen, it's possible his body hasn't been found because it's in a narrow or hard to miss spot. The next theory is the one that police believe, that Rick was kidnapped and or killed. The scene where his truck was found seems to have some indications of foul play, like the smashed glass and truck battery being messed with. Rick's jacket and his dad's shotgun were also still in the truck, two things he probably would have taken with him if he had left to go find help. Sandra Bendel also insists Rick never would have borrowed his dad's shotgun without returning it if he was able to. But if foul play was involved, who was responsible? Some people believe he may have been a victim of a hit and run and the driver hit his body. At least one person speculating about this case has mentioned his estranged wife and wondered if she might have been involved somehow. Several people wondered if his disappearance had something to do with his prior drug and alcohol abuse. Maybe he was killed in a drug deal gone wrong. One person also mentioned that he was reportedly sober at the time, but there was beer found in his truck. Other people speculated that Rick had witnessed some sort of illegal activity or policy violation at his work, and he was killed by someone who was afraid he would blow the whistle on them. One Reddit user mentioned something else I found interesting. This person wondered if Rick wasn't actually going pheasant hunting. According to them, it's unusual to hunt pheasants in the evening when Rick was last heard from, since most of them are asleep. This person speculated that the supposed pheasant hunting trip may have just been a cover-up, and Rick was going to meet up with someone who ended up hurting him. He might not have told his loved ones the truth because he was tangled up in something dangerous, and he might not have wanted them to have any extra information that might put them in danger as well. Whatever happened to Rick, it's been almost a quarter of a century since he was last seen, and we still don't know what happened. Richard Willis Bendele was 29 years old when he was last seen at Craters of the Moon in Idaho on November 17, 1996. Rick is a white male, 5 feet 11 inches tall, with brown hair and green eyes. He may have had a mustache and would be 54 years old if alive today. If you have any information about the disappearance of Rick Bendele, you can contact the Blaine County Sheriff's Office at 208-788-5555. So there's not a whole lot of information publicly available on this case, but I did want to share what I could find. I hope we find out what happened to Rick someday, but I'll be transparent, it doesn't look good. If he was kidnapped, I don't know why his captors would keep him alive for very long, and if he succumbed to the elements, finding him now might be like looking for the proverbial needle in a haystack. I can only hope and pray that the truth eventually comes out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.